What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to talk about plyometric training. Let's get it popping. So what are plyometrics? Essentially what plyometrics is a quick, rapid, eccentric muscle action, which in turn stimulates the stretch reflex by the muscle spindles, as well as the storage of elastic energy in the tendons and the connective tissue, which increases the force produced during the concentric action. In layman's terms, basically plyometrics is a quick down up in a jump there, and the faster you go down, able to handle that force there, that should in turn allow you to be able to jump higher than you would compared to coming down normally or at a normal speed and then trying to jump as high as you can. Plyometrics can be a very challenging exercise due to the increased amount of forces upon the body there. Okay? And let's take a look at a couple different landing examples. Okay? So if you just land with normal double-legged landing there, okay, so you jump up, you land from the jump there, okay, and use your knees and hips and ankles and you bend to absorb that impact on the landing. I like to call this soft knees. Essentially, the forces on your body are 3 to 4 times whatever your body weight is. However, if you land with very stiff legs, meaning that your muscles contract quickly upon landing there, not allowing your knees and hips and ankles to bend, that leads to forces on the body upwards of 6 to 8 times your body weight. So notice here that stiff-legged landings means that a lot more forces are absorbed by the body compared to 3 to 4 times, or compared to normal double-leg landings. So if we took a 132-pound athlete, for example, if you were to land with double legs, with soft knees, that means the amount of force on your body upon landing would be about actually 180 to 528 pounds of force, which is a decent amount there. However, upon your landing, if you try to land very stiff, okay, meaning once you hit the ground there, your joints don't move at all, that means that the amount of forces in your body is upwards of 792 to 1,056 pounds of force. That's a much bigger difference. It's one reason why, for safety purposes, especially as people are learning how to jump, okay, and how to perform plyometrics, or landings at the very end there, we want to make sure that we land with soft knees to help absorb that impact on the body. However, again, a lot of times in sports here, we need to come quickly off the ground there, being able to handle that quick eccentric action there upon the body, and that in turn should help us to be able to launch ourselves higher off the ground. So in our previous slide there, we need to learn how to land with stiff leg landings, but for beginners there, or those who are not used to handling the amount of force in the body, recommend landing initially with soft knees. Here's an example of a depth jump, okay? So what a depth or reactive jump is you step off of some sort of height, okay, or a box there, hit the ground very quickly, and you immediately jump off the ground as fast and as high as you can. Now let's say this box was 1 meter tall, okay? This box looks a little bit shorter there, but if we imagine it was 1 meter tall there, the amount of reactive forces of your body hitting the ground in between landing and then jumping up into the air, that's going to be 8 to 10 pounds of body weight, which is incredible there. So again, our bodies need to be able to handle quickly going down and up off the ground there. So there will be times where we need to land with very stiff legs, okay? But especially again, for beginners there, as we're learning how to jump and safely land there, we want to absorb the impact on our landings. But in between reactive jumps, where you hit the ground quickly and jump as high as you can, especially jumps that are continuous in nature, we do want to land with stiff legs, like in this case here. The knees are going to be stiff, very minimal bend, okay, after the landing there, and that should help us to jump higher into the air. So to have a better understanding of plyometrics there, we need to understand what the stretch shortening cycle is. Okay? Essentially, the stretch shortening cycle is made up of 3 different phases. Okay? Phase 1 is the eccentric action of the muscle, which essentially means the muscle, the agonistic muscle, the muscle that we want to produce force, it's going to undergo a rapid stretch. Once the muscle is stretched to the point that it wants to be for the particular jump, okay, there's going to be an amortization phase. Essentially, this is a pause between phases 1 and 3, or essentially a pause between the eccentric and concentric muscular actions. So muscle stretches very quickly. Okay, there's like a pause in between the quick stretch and the muscle contracting and the muscle shortening again. And then phase 3 is the concentric phase of the stretch shortening cycle, which means your agonistic muscles are going to quickly shorten there to help propel your body into the air. So again, to repeat, eccentric action means the muscle lengthens quickly. Amortization means is the pause between the muscle lengthening quickly and contracting quickly. And the concentric phase is where the muscle shortens, contracting quickly. Here's an example of the stretch shortening cycle undergone through with the bench press. So phase 1, where the muscles are lengthening under load, specifically the triceps muscles, your pec muscles, essentially your chest muscles, and your anterior deltoid muscles, or your front chest muscles, undergo eccentric contraction as the bar is lowered to your chest. Phase 2 is when the bar touches your chest, okay, otherwise known as an isometric contraction. And then phase 3 there is the bar is accelerated off the chest as the bar is pressed upward, meaning that your triceps, pecs, and anterior delts are going through a concentric contraction, meaning that they are shortening during the phase 3. So again, a lot of movements here undergo the stretch shortening cycle. The key point with plyometrics is that this eccentric phase is going to be a rapid or quick lengthening phase. So how do we prepare our bodies for plyometric exercises? Number one there is to choose different activities that are lower level in nature, meaning less intense, to help get our bodies warmed up or prepared for the plyometric exercises during the workout. Some common ones we can do this are some easy jump ropes, as well as easy hopping, jumping, and leaping activities. Number 2 here, if you're to undergo a rigorous plyometric exercise, it's a good idea to have an adequate strength base level there and have good technique so to keep your body safe when performing more challenging plyometric activities. So before undergoing heavy plyometric activities or intense plyometric activities, it's important first that we know how to jump and land correctly. In order to land correctly, it is recommended that you land with your entire foot. It's recommended that you land with your knees staying in line with your feet instead of your knees buckling in or your knees buckling way out. In addition there, your chest should be relatively upright. We shouldn't be tipped over too far. Number 2, it's valuable to combine plyometric training and strength training to help enhance your explosiveness. So basically, don't just do plyometric training or don't just do strength training. Do a combination of plyometric and strength training throughout your training program there in order to best enhance your plyometric exercises. Number 3, for enhancing our strength levels, in general, it's recommended that the loads we choose for our strength exercises are between 75 to 85% of that particular exercise's 1 rep max. And the reason we do that there is if we go back to one of our previous slides here, again, seeing that landing with stiff legs, again, that typically happens when we do continuous jumps there, means every time we hit the ground in between our continuous jumps, that means we're undergoing forces that are equivalent to 6 to 8 times our body weight. It's meaning that we need to be strong to handle these high amounts of force there in between our consecutive repeated jumps. In general there, while you could do plyometric training during any part of the training cycle, it's recommended that the highest volume of plyometric work should be done during this specialized period of training throughout our training cycle there. And typically the specialized period of training occurs closer to the athletic season and or during the actual athletic season. Okay. And that's due to mainly the high intensity levels that these plyometric activities require and due to the intense impact they have on the central nervous system. Typically, Early on in the training year, when you've just gotten done with your season and your body's recovering from the physical demands of the season, your body is typically broken down and needs to recover from all those intense demands. So typically early on in the training cycle, meaning early off season, we don't want to do a ton of plyometric work. We can do some, but just don't do a ton of volume, and gradually increase the intensity and gradually increase the volume there as you get closer to the season. To kind of help with this, there's during the general preparatory phase, meaning again the phases that are earlier on in the off season, some kind of jumps we can do that are less taxing on the central nervous system and are not as intense plyometric activities are things like skipping, jumping, and hopping. One example of this would be lead-up jumps are great for warm-ups, be performed during the warm-up period prior to doing plyometrics. Things like, again, low-level jumping rope, okay, maybe some easy skips, things along those lines. So when you're designing your plyometric training program, in general, we usually think of plyometrics in terms of lower body exercises, but we also have some upper body plyometric exercises as well. Anything from medicine ball throws, medicine ball catches, and different types of push-ups, especially push-up jumps where you launch your body off the ground. So again, remember that plyometrics is just defined as a rapid eccentric action followed by a rapid concentric action. So again, this can happen still in upper body activities. Medicine ball throws, catches, and different types of push-ups, including push-up jumps, can be done in an explosive manner there, meaning that they would be classified as a upper body plyometric exercise. For a lower body plyometrics, there are several different categories that we can often use there. Number one are jumps. In general, jumps are categorized as jumping or as launching your body off the ground, off of two legs, and landing with two legs. So jumps, two legs to two legs. Hops are different, is usually hops are using one leg and landing on that same leg. So for example, if you're hopping on your right foot for like 10 reps, you do 10 reps of hops on one leg, and every time you land on each of those jumps, on each of those hops with one leg there, that would meaning that each of those would be considered to be a hop. Now, similar to that, but not exactly the same, are bounds. Bounds are jumping off of one leg and landing on the other leg. A lot of times we'll see this if we do some jumps side to side, jumping off our right leg and then landing on our left leg. So launching your body off the ground with one leg and landing on the other leg will be considered to be a bound. In addition, we can decide to do a single jump, okay, meaning jump and land there, or we could do multiple jumps in a row. So instead of pausing between each jump, you would try to jump high and quickly off the ground in between jumps. Now, the things we can do with lower body plyometrics is included weights there, either by adding bands that are pulling yourself down and or holding dumbbells or barbells there to help weight the jump. We can do body weighted jumps, or we can do actually assisted jumps where we use bands that are attached to points above you, and we hold on to those bands, and that can take away some of our resistance, making it easier to jump higher. This slide just summarizes some various lower level plyometric drills. You can read this here if you would like there. Very good resource to kind of summarize what some of these different types of drills are. Mentioned previously that especially early on in the off season, we want to pick jumps that are less intense, and we want to do much lower volume early on in the off season, versus as we get closer to the season, towards the end of the off season, beginning of the preseason, our jumps want to be more intense in nature, and we want to increase the amount of volume. And these categories here, they kind of fall into one or the other, meaning that if you want to pick higher intensity plyometric exercises, these are going to be the things that you're going to want to do. Versus you want to pick exercises that are lower in intensity, these are some different categories that you want to pick. So for example here, single jumps, meaning you jump, land, reset. jump, land, reset. Those are a lot less intense than doing continuous jumps, meaning jump and then immediately when you hit the ground, try to jump as high and as quickly off the ground as you can for several jumps in a row. Jumps that are lower, meaning fewer inches or feet off the ground, are going to be much less intense than jumps that are many more inches or many more feet higher off the ground. Jumps that are shorter, meaning we travel less of a distance horizontally, are going to be less intense than jumps where you jump out farther. Jumps that have no added weight to your body, such as a barbell or dumbbells there, or using a weight vest. If we don't use those things and just use our body weight, those jumps are going to be less intense than those that are weighted in nature. Double leg jumps, because your body weight is dispersed between two legs instead of one leg, are going to be much less intense than single-legged jumps. Jumping on a softer surface, such as the grass or sand, is going to be less intense than doing jumps on a harder surface, things like a basketball court, things like concrete, things like a tennis court. Vertical jumps, meaning jumping up and down, will be much less intense than horizontal jumps. This is one reason why early on in my off-season programs, I typically will include more jumps that just go straight up and down, things like pogo jumps, things like vertical jumps, and I'll include relatively fewer jumps that require you to jump out for a distance there. Okay? Things like a broad jump, for example. If you include a rotation in the body, so for example, you might jump into the air and rotate your body 90 degrees before you land. As soon as you start incorporating some sort of rotation, that's going to make the jump more challenging and more intense than having no rotation on the jumps. This is why typically, if we're going to do jumps here, earlier on in the off-season, don't include any rotation in your plans there, versus later on in the off-season as we get closer to regular season, maybe incorporate some sort of twist as you jump into the air. Landing on a box is going to be less intense than landing on the ground. And the main reason for this is that when you land on the box, your body's not falling from as great of a height before it lands. Therefore, the landing forces on a box are going to be much less compared to jumping and landing on the actual ground. Having a longer amortization phase, meaning there's longer time between landing from one jump and jumping up to the next jump, that's going to be less intense than having a shorter amortization phase. So basically, the faster you're able to get off the ground there between jumps, that's going to be more intense than spending more time in between jumps. And then finally, if you're trying to jump as high as you can or as far as you can, that's going to be more intense than trying to do jumps that are sub-maximal in nature, or you're not trying to jump as high or as far as possible. Again, to clarify there, lower intensity jumps, do these more early on in the off-season and or for athletes coming back from injury, and choose these exercises the closer we get to season or the more well-trained the athlete is. Here are some more factors there that affect the intensity of lower body plyometric drills. Again, something for you to read on your own if you'd like to. So how do we design a plyometric program there in terms of frequency? So how often should we perform plyometric drills? In general, we should usually wait 2 to 3 days or 48 to 72 hours in between different plyometric sessions there. That in general will help your body recover enough in between plyometric sessions. And that's important due to the high amount of ground reactive forces that we incur upon our bodies when we perform these jumps, and thus our body needs to recover. Number 2, plyometric drills are very central nervous system taxing. Therefore, since they're so hard on the central nervous system, we need to allow our bodies to recover from the central nervous system fatigue, and therefore we need to be able to rest in between these exercise bouts. In general, we're looking at in between 2 to 4 plyometric sessions per week. How much time there in between sets and in between reps? If we're specifically looking at depth jumps meaning we're going off of a box, dropping off of a box, hitting that ground quickly, and trying to jump as high as we can while spending as minimal time on the ground. A good general recommendation for depth jumps is going to be resting between 5 to 10 seconds between jumps, and then 2 to 3 minutes between sets of jumps. So for example, if you had 3 sets of 3 jumps, you'd perform one jump, rest 5 to 10 seconds, perform a second jump, rest 5 to 10 seconds, perform a third jump, okay? And now we're done with our first set of 3 jumps, rest 2 to 3 minutes, then perform another set of 3 jumps. Rest another 3 minutes, perform another set of 3 jumps. With recovery, if our goal is to become as explosive as we can, our bodies need to be able to fully recover in between our reps or sets. In order to fully recover between those we need to make sure that our training program there allows for enough recovery. So therefore, power training is not going to be very conducive to cardiorespiratory conditioning. So if I want to become the bounciest, most explosive athlete I can be, I need to give myself enough rest in between sets and reps of jumps so that my body is fully recovered. And thirdly here, drills for a given body area should not be performed 2 days in succession. Okay? Meaning that I should not do a very intense lower body plyometric session on Monday and follow that up with another very intense lower body plyometric session on Tuesday. Make sure that I rest at least until Wednesday before I perform another intense bout of intense lower body plyometric work. However, what you could do is you could do an intense lower body plyometric session on Monday, and then on Tuesday you could do an intense upper body plyometric session. That's one way you can work around that. Volume of a plyometric program in the early stages, okay, meaning typically early off-season there, it's recommended to select 2 to 3 exercises and execute one set of 6 to 10 reps for each exercise. In general, that's a relatively good recommendation. Recommended that you perform no more than 6 plyometric jump exercises in a session, especially if you're doing 2 to 3 sets. Again, that's a general recommendation. If we're trying to calculate the amount of volume for lower body exercises, a good way to do this is to count the number of contacts per workout, meaning how many times do our feet hit the ground with jumps, or we could look at how far of a distance that we cover in our jumps. Distance is typically useful if we're performing things like hops or bounds for distance. Doing that there, distance might be a better indicator of volume for lower body drills. For upper body drills, things like med ball throws, things like push-up jumps, okay, the number of throws or catches per workout, good way to calculate volume. Again, just depending on how experienced your athletes are in performing plyometric drills, you might need to change the volume based off of each athlete's ability levels. This table here gives an appropriate amount of plyometric volumes there that you can try to shoot for in your training sessions. For beginners, typical volume meaning about 80 to 100 jumps at most per training session. Intermediate, somewhere between 100 to 120, and advanced 120 to 140. Now understand these contacts there, they include everything from hops to jumps to bounds, things along those lines there. So, and in addition to that there, if you're performing maximal efforts on each of these plyometric exercises, you probably can't do these required volumes. For example, if I were to ask a beginner athlete to perform 80 vertical jumps, and each jump they're going to try to jump as high as they can, that would be a ton of volume of very intense jumps. That probably is not going to be good for anyone, even an advanced athlete there. So this 80 jumps is probably be a combination of maximal effort jumps, but also some other jumps, maybe some jumping rope, which are more sub-max jumps in nature, maybe a combination of one-legged and two-legged jumps. So just understand here, this volume here is just a general recommendation based on experience level and should include a variety of different jumps and different intensity levels in those jumps. Just like a resistance training program or a running training program, in order to get better, we need to make things more difficult gradually over time. The progressive overload program or principle follows this as well. You need to focus on gradual increases in training frequency. How many times a week do we do it? Volume there, how many total jumps that we do, and how intense those jumps are in various combinations. And again, this is summarizing a previous slide, but the higher we jump, that's progressive overload. If we're jumping farther out, that's progressive overload. If we're performing continuous jumps versus single leg jumps, continuous jumps versus single jumps, that's going to be progressive overload. Performing more jumps, okay, that's going to be progressive overload, and so on and so forth. So gradually increase the training frequency, volume, and intensity throughout the training year to prepare your bodies best for their competitions while minimizing the risk of injury. Here are some good recommendations on different plyometric warm-up drills to get the body prepared for the intense jumps that the body is going to undergo in their training sessions. Again, you can read this on your own time. This is an example schedule for integrating resistance training and plyometrics throughout a training week. So resistance training, meaning your weight training, okay, or body weight training there. And over here is plyometrics. On Monday, you can decide to do high-intensity upper body work, very taxing on the central nervous system. Lower body work, I apologize there. So high-intensity upper body resistance training work, so more heavier weights there performed with the upper body. For plyometrics for the lower body, okay, these would be some sub-maximal jumps, things like jumping ropes or things along those lines. Tuesday there could be lower intensity, lower body resistance training. Maybe you're doing lighter weights, maybe for relatively more reps and maybe not to failure. Versus for upper body, maybe these are going to be high intensity plyometric work. Things like trying to launch medicine balls for super far distances, something along those lines. And then Thursday, something similar. Friday, something similar. Wednesday would be a great day in between there to help allow your body to recover in between resistance training and plyometric workouts. So we touched a little bit about landing with plyometrics. We want to land safely there. This picture gives a good idea or shows a good example of how we should land safely from plyometric drills. Notice here that the shoulders are in line with the knees, okay, which helps keep your center of gravity over your base of support, or your 2 feet are touching the ground. A common error I see with some of my athletes is they'll land with their chest really far forward, and that puts more pressure there on the knees. Something which you don't see from this view here is that your knees should line up with your feet. If the knees are buckling in, that's not good. And likewise, if your knees are too far out compared to where your feet are pointing, that also is not good. So this is a good, safe landing position from plyometrics. Another thing that can help with our plyometric performance, keep you safer, is breathing. So if you take a breath in and hold that breath briefly, not saying hold it for 30 seconds there, hold it briefly while you're undergoing that eccentric to concentric muscle contraction, meaning as you land, upon landing and trying to quickly jump back off the ground, this can help you produce 20% greater force there because your spine is stabilized. So instead of your spine being loosey-goosey like a rope, it's locked in and solid like let's say a can of unopened soda. Okay? So that stabilizes the spine there, which in turn helps you produce more force and prevent lower back injuries. So by breathing in a little bit and squeezing your torso muscles in between jumps, great way to help enhance performance and keep you safer. Here are a couple of videos that you can watch to see what is possible through gradual, progressive plyometric training in combination with resistance training over many years. This first link there shows you an athlete that is northwards of 6'7", over 290 pounds there, and is performing some crazy, intense plyometric exercises. Highly recommend you watch this. Likewise, in this link here, you'll see some awesome track athletes performing very explosive work there, and just kind of shows you and gives you what's possible if you consistently perform plyometric training, resistance training in a well thought out training program for many years. If you've got anything else, let me know. Ask questions. Have a good day. Booyah!